Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Closers Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Alvarado. With me today is Quinn the Moondog Kalani. How are you doing, man?
Not bad. Not bad, all things considered.
Yeah,
Pretty good where I'm at.
that's good. That's good to hear. There's a lot that's gone on, man. There's a lot that's happened. And, we weren't planning on putting out an episode this soon, but because of recent events, you and I earlier were debating whether or not we should even do an episode, whether we should wait till like what our best course of action would be. And, you know, you kind of put the ball in my court and was like, whatever you want to do, we'll go with it. So I thought the best course of action would be to give everybody, to inform people of what's happened, give a summary of everything that's happened. And then at the very end, we'll give each other a chance to you know give our own thoughts of the situation and maybe talk a little bit openly on opinions, and then that'll be it. So it's a pretty short episode. This is pretty sensitive material, sensitive information, and we're respectful of that. So we're not going to really touch on anything else other than that today. Next week we will have a guest on, and maybe a couple guests, and it'll be more of a lighthearted episode, barring any other crazy social events happening. It should be back to normal, at least on this show. So, anyways, okay. So, the timeline that I'm looking at and that I kind of have been going off of is starting on May 25th. So this was Monday. Today we're recording on a Friday. This will be out Saturday. So Monday the 25th, there was a video that was posted on Facebook, where in which George Floyd, who is widely known at this point, who was shown being restrained by a police officer, but there were 4 police officers total on the scene. This police officer had his knee on the windpipe of George Floyd for a total of 9 minutes. And in the video, which is very graphic, he is seen begging for his life, basically. And the cop isn't budging. He says because the guy can talk, he can breathe, which is complete bullshit. Which, is just obvious in the sense of he died because of that. Like, he couldn't breathe. You can still talk and not be able to breathe. And also, if you have your knee on someone's, I mean, you being an MMA guy, Quinn, I'm assuming you know this. When you put a lot of pressure on someone's neck, they might be able to breathe, but it doesn't feel like it because you're cutting off oxygen to their brain.
You're cutting off the blood supply to the brain.
Right. Which the blood carries oxygen up there, if I'm correct, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why he passed away. So that's Monday. And according to a statement from the Minneapolis Police Department, officers were called to investigate reports of forgery, and Floyd was suspected of writing a bad check, and that's why they were called on the scene of this local convenience store called Cup Foods. Or actually, no, it was because he was suspected of having a counterfeit $20 bill.
Monopoly money.
Yeah, Monopoly money, yeah. So that was Monday. The video was put up. There was outcry, but things escalated on Tuesday when the FBI and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension began to investigate the incident. And the 4 officers that were involved with the incident were fired by the police precinct. And Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis said on Twitter that this is the right call. Being black in America should not be a death sentence. And he also wrote on Facebook, for 5 minutes, we watched a white officer press his knee into a black man's neck. When you hear someone calling for help, you're supposed to help. That officer failed in the most basic human sense. What happened in Chicago, on Chicago and 38th last night is awful. It was traumatic. It serves as a reminder how far we have to go. So then that evening, protesters gathered in the streets of Minneapolis, chanting, I can't breathe. And then that brings us to Wednesday, which this is the day where things kind of escalated fairly quickly. The Minneapolis Police Department revealed the names of the officers fired. So Derek Chauvin, Thomas Lane, I'm going to butcher this, but Tu Tao and J. Alexander Kung. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. That's via the New York Times. And Mayor Frey called for prosecutors to file federal charges against the men. And people wanted to see action. So there were more protests that night. But then last night, things just exploded. And actually, all day yesterday, things just exploded. And I think it's partially because of just the climate online, which we'll get to after I give the rest of the timeline. But on Thursday, prosecutors continue to investigate whether or not to charge Derek Chauvin, the officer who killed Floyd. The lack of action from authorities accelerated protests near the Minneapolis Police Department's 3rd Precinct. Participants eventually set fire to the police precinct station, according to the New York Times. Protests also broke out in New York, Denver, Phoenix, and Columbus, Ohio. Demonstrators also gathered in Louisville, Kentucky, to protest the death of Breonna Taylor, a black woman who was shot by police in her own home in March. And NBC reported that Chauvin had been the subject of several police conduct reports, at least 12 since he started in 2001. Still, according to the Minneapolis Community's United Against Police Brutality database, which has been cited in various reports on Chauvin's record. He's received only a few verbal reprimands, and most of the complaints in the database are listed as closed. So, on top of that, yesterday, you saw a lot of these protests turning to basically riots as well, and a number of large chain stores became like the targets for these riots. They became these riots, incited looting and stuff like that. And you can see a lot of the videos on Twitter, on Facebook. And then today, that brings us to today. Early Friday morning, President Donald Trump denounced the protesters, tweeting, and I quote, "These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty, and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you." Twitter flagged the tweet with a message reading, "This tweet violated the Twitter rules about glorifying violence. However, Twitter has determined that it may be in the public's interest for the tweet to remain accessible." This is the first time that Twitter has flagged one of Trump's tweets as questionable, and the move comes days after the platform added a fact check option to some of Trump's false tweets about mail-in voting, prompting him to threaten to close down Twitter. He then signed an executive order aimed at bolstering the government's ability to regulate social media sites. Undeterred, the president spent the morning platform on Twitter, tweeting, "In the early afternoon, the National Guard has arrived on the scene there in Minneapolis and fully prepared. George Floyd will not have died in vain. Respect his memory." Also this morning, a crew of CNN reporters were arrested by police while covering the protests in Minneapolis, and you can see the video because they were literally live on TV when this happened. And so correspondent Omar Jimenez, producer Bill Kirkos, and camera operator Lionel Mendez were taken into custody by Minnesota State Police while reporting on street closures. And the journalists were also released Friday morning soon after the arrest. Now, the governor of Minnesota apologized to CNN, CNN President Jeff Zucker, and Jimenez went back on the air shortly after his release, noting that law enforcement was not violent with him at all, and that one of the officers told him they were just following orders. So, just more recently, the mayor of Minneapolis put out or placed a curfew on the city starting at 8 p.m. local time and extending through the weekend. And George Floyd's family attorney, Benjamin Crump, told CNN that they are waiting for the final autopsy results from the medical examiner's office, but will give him a proper funeral and also to have an independent autopsy done because they do not trust the city of Minneapolis, which I mean, at this point, can you blame them? I mean, shit. And then Floyd's family has hired former NYC chief medical examiner Dr. Michael Baden to do the autopsy, and that Baden will do the procedure next week. And obviously the story is still developing. And I got a large majority of those details from the Rolling Stone timeline that they have so masterfully and importantly made for the public to view. So you can go online and look at this more in detail. There will be more things updated onto that article as more events occur, which I assume there will be more because tomorrow is Saturday and then the day after that Sunday. That's the weekend. And that means that there's going to be a lot of cities across the country protesting. There's already going to be some protests in Sacramento that I've been seeing advertisements for. I unfortunately will not be able to attend any of those due to some other engagements I have. But yeah, so things have really escalated to a point. And I've been doing a lot of talking, Quinn, so I want to get your take on this whole situation. On one hand, there's the fuel of, this whole situation didn't come out of nowhere. You know what I mean? So I'm just curious, what's your take on this whole thing?
It's unfortunately, I can't say I'm surprised. If anything, like it almost seems it almost seems bizarre, but it almost seems like there hadn't been some sort of just seems like we were due for something like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that racial violence at the hand of authoritative figures has almost become par for the course. It's almost become standardized, normalized.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's always been like that. I think cell phones have just made it more apparent to folks outside of the African American community who weren't aware.
Yeah.
I think it's always been like this. Now it's just with the advent of technology. All eyes of the world are can be placed upon something.
Exactly. Technology has a big part to play in it.
But I'm not surprised, which I think is one of the more sadder aspects. Like, I'm not surprised that this happened.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that there is a racist homicidal police officer who's killed someone before.
Yeah. 3 other people, I think.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that person is a police officer.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that when he's supposed to detain an African American, that he decides to kill an African American.
Yeah. In front of other civilians.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the other police officers stood by and let nothing happen. Nothing surprises me about it. It's
Yeah.
just more or less just devastating sameness
That
is
is
what it
very
is.
sad. That is very
Devastating
sad.
sameness. You know.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I think the shittiest thing about this is well, there are many shitty things about it, but one aspect that I've been thinking about a lot is the fact that this guy, this murderer, has murdered 3 times before,
Yeah.
and it had just fallen upon deaf ears, apparently.
Yeah, it apparently it was they were investigated each time and he just got verbal warnings from the
Yeah,
police
and they
department.
were they were they're minority men, so
Yeah.
this dude has a pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it's outside the realm to call him a serial murderer. He's murdered more than 3 people
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So I'm just not surprised, man. I'm just not sure what comes out of it. Hopefully, change, but change has to be wholesale, has to be systemic, or nothing will happen.
Right. And I just think in this past year, I feel like tensions have just been growing and growing and growing,
Well, I
in a
mean,
lot of different ways.
what a horrible time for this to happen. I mean, everyone's cooped up, locked up, wound up,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
People who were looking for an outlet, subconsciously or consciously, now you have one.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and you have a figure to exercise that against. You have a
Right.
common foe now.
Right.
So,
And
yeah,
yeah,
it's a very tricky time.
it is very tricky, but I think because like what you said, like the whole virus and stuff, I don't even think it's too much just people being inside and wound up. I think they're wound up for good reasons. I mean, a lot of the people that are super outraged right now, not everybody, there's a people from all from across the political spectrum, from all walks of life who are pissed about this. It's not just one type of person. So I want to make that clear that I do acknowledge that, but you know, I'm talking from a certain segment of the population who, in the past year, you got your hopes up because of Bernie Sanders, right? And you're hoping that this person will be able to bring about some form of change. He's looking like he's leading in the polls, all this stuff. Yada yada. I've said it before, right? Then he drops out during this virus when people are losing jobs, but then all of us like people are losing jobs left and right. People like obviously unemployment's gone up astronomically.
Yeah.
But then billionaires have just gotten richer. Like people who own businesses, like corporations, have just gotten extra, like extra nor. I can't even talk. Like incredibly more rich out of this pandemic situation because
Mm.
they don't have to pay as many people. And there's a lot of economic reasons why people are still getting rich, and the economy, stock market wise, is doing well, um, for now. But we're like common folk like you and me and a lot of people, most people, probably everybody who's going to listen to this episode, don't see any of that. You know, like there's a lot of people who are unemployed, still looking for jobs. There's college kids who have to repay school. Like there's so much unrest right now, right? Economically speaking, for just the average person. And then on top of that, you add this social layer. It's just a powder keg. Like you politically, there's unrest because you have to pick between rapist Joe Biden or rapist Donald Trump, right? And then you have economic unrest because people can't find jobs. There's all this, all these barriers, but then you see the people at the top, they keep going up the ladder. They keep getting rich. And then this happens. Now social unrest. That's always been there.
Mm-mm.
And I mean Ferguson isn't just something that we forgot about. The scars of Ferguson still obviously run true to this day. And I just think there's a lot tied to this. There's a lot of things that were boiling underneath the surface, and this was just, across the country. This is an incident, an injustice that really, I think, was the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't see this stopping anytime soon. The not the rioting, but more so just the conversation. I don't see.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully the conversation never stops. Hopefully, it shouldn't even be a conversation. It should be a decorative statement. It shouldn't even be a decorative statement. It should be a rhetorical statement because all of this should be, issues of the past.
Yeah,
But it's not. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what anyone's gonna do. Um, the most we can hope to do is to put people in positions of power to change the system from the way it is. You know,
yeah,
long gone are the days of revolutions you know of toppling institutions.
yeah. It,
Americans don't
yeah.
possess that power, so
It's weird though. Well, not weird, but I hear you and I do agree. I mean, I just agreed with you right now. But then instantly, you know, I think about what's happened to a lot of the politicians who we did vote in, thinking that they would change something, and they just become part of the system that we thought that they would change.
yeah.
Obama, famously, I mean, he's the uh, he's the leader of the Democratic Party, and he was the person that they were trying to not get elected, and he beat Hillary. And change was literally a slogan. Did he really change anything? No, not really. He became part of the same system. Bernie Sanders, I mean, he's wanting people to vote for Joe Biden, like outright. I mean, he dropped out of the race when there was still a lot of states left to vote. It wasn't likely he would move or he would win, but he dropped out pretty quick, and now he's even scaling back on what he believes or what we thought he believed. He's starting to kind of reel back his kind of more democratic socialist talking points and stuff, and he's starting to agree with the moderate right Democratic Party. And it's difficult. It's like I'm nervous. I mean, even AOC, she's starting to get really buddy buddy with Pelosi and stuff. There's just so much that I'm just like, I don't know I don't know if there's a way to change anything, man. And it's really disheartening. I don't know though.
I don't know about anything of that. I do know that this is gonna the optics of this doesn't bode well for Amy Klobuchar's vice presidential hopes.
That is true. Very true.
Um, I also know that a stimulus check going through right now is looking better and better to Republicans.
That is true. I mean,
you
that's
know,
it's sad
they're
that
gonna
it takes somebody dying in order for the
not even that. What they're thinking is like, oh my God, let's just throw money. They're gonna throw money at the problem. That's gonna be their solution.
Oh yeah.
They're not gonna do anything against against the police force. And they're not gonna be willing to secede any sort of power. So what they're gonna do is just they're gonna rush our stimulus check. Mitch McConnell already came out today and said this next stimulus check will be the last one. So he's already softening his position on from when he said the Heroes Act would die,
Yeah.
upon entering the Senate. So my prediction is that they're gonna throw money at it. I hope that we're gonna forget about it and move onward. But the only thing that has to only thing that can happen that is going to change anything is you have to get people with radical progressive ideas into authoritative positions of power, people that are going to institute policies and procedures and laws that benefit minority communities, specifically the African American community, specifically the Hispanic American community, and
Yeah.
onward, all minority races, all minority cultures.
Yeah.
Until that point, you're going to continue having these.
I agree. And it's something that I don't necessarily talk about a lot. Well, I mean, I've never talked about it on the podcast, but I mean, my dad, um, told me that when he was younger, he lived in San Jose, and one of his cousins was stopped by police and was taken into custody for having a broken taillight. And he was taken behind a grocery store that was closed because it was later at night. Obviously, a broken taillight, easy to see at night. And they beat him to like really, 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 really brutally. And the next day, they released him from prison, from the jail, and he couldn't even see out of his eyes. He had a broken jaw, and he had to sleep like that. You know, so it's like everybody. I bet you, like everybody has a story, or they know somebody who's had some sort of injustice done to them up, by the police, and
Yeah. Well, I mean,
no one's
one of the
sorry.
giant problems is that police forces aren't reflective of the communities they serve.
Yeah,
You know, um, minority communities need to police themselves in the sense that there needs to be social and federal programs, state programs put in place as outreach to get minority men and women to become police officers,
yeah,
to become sheriff patrol within their own communities, man. Because it's just apparent that you can't trust those outside your communities to do right by you. And I mean, it's
it's true.
understandably so. Why would you trust someone who has no sort of cultural inclination to who you are,
Yeah,
or your plights or your struggles, your standing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So, I mean, that at the very least is something that has to change. It has to change. There has to be more government influence in this sort of thing, whether it be federal or state. Your police department is it funded by your tax money.
yeah.
It is a socialist program. So your
Mm-hmm.
your
It
your
is.
your police force should be, reflective of the society that it serves.
I agree. I think that we should just privatize the police.
Mm.
I'll make the. I'm just kidding. That's not fucking. I laugh at people who think that that's a good idea. There's not many people who think that's a good idea, but there are some out there, and it's just like how. Yes, let's allow for the people who make billions of dollars to just own the
Yeah.
police. Like, yeah, okay,
I would say just know, if this if the murder of George Floyd is surprising you to anyway, if it's a shock to you anyway, that's a good thing. But know this, that this has been happening to African American men and Hispanic men and minority men every day, you know, unseen by the majority of the world for decades.
yeah,
You know, unfortunately, it's nothing new.
yeah, but it has to change, and there are going to be more too. That's the sad thing. This isn't going to be the last time, but you know, I hope, and we can all. the only thing we can do is just hope that we are moving in the right direction and that all of this unrest, all of this turmoil that we're all going through collectively as a nation and as a world because of the pandemic and everything that, but more importantly as a nation, um,
Mm.
that
Yeah, I mean,
that it will one day that all of this will lead to a better place. I'm hoping, but
yeah. If
there's
you're
no way to tell.
listening, if you're listening to this and you want to be, part of the protest, part of the opposition to authority, then just consider this and identify this before you start. Let it mean something. Let your being there mean something.
Yeah,
You know, if you can do that, then I think you're in the right.
I agree. I agree very much. And if you do want to help, um, let me see. If you do want to help monetarily, um, there is, I believe it's the Minnesota Freedom Fund. I believe that's what it's called. Let me see. But there's a fund that um, combats the harms of incarceration in Minnesota. So basically, what they do is they have a fund. It's a fund where um, people who are unjustly jailed by the police, like the CNN reporters who are just randomly jailed for no reason, um, they bail them out. So that's definitely a place where I've seen a lot of people wanting to donate or they have donated. And I would urge you, if you're listening to this, to donate to them right now to help out any protesters who are being unjustly jailed because you know that that is happening.
Yeah.
So,
Here's another thing. Here's a whole another element to this. We've speaking to our audience here, me and Marco both have worked in retail for quite some time. This past decade of our lives is marked with the stain of retail. We can
yeah.
both tell you that a fake $20 bill is one, not surprising. Anyone could have a fake $20 bill. They
Yeah.
are, they get into circulation quite easily. And once they're in circulation, that's in it. That's it. They're in it, man.
Yeah,
They're in it till
exactly.
someone
Yeah.
catches it.
Yeah.
Until
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
And when someone does catch it, a $20 bill is not a big deal.
It's really not a big deal.
In fact,
So
it's one of
fucked.
the most dismissive things of all time. Most often than not, it's a common mistake. The person who holds the $20 bill had no idea it was forged.
Exactly.
Had no idea it's fake,
Yeah.
and will often, seek to rectify it themselves. And even if they don't, it's $20. In some states, if you have to if you were to steal something from a store and to be charged with theft, you have to steal over $100 worth of value of product.
Yeah. It's fucked up, dude. Like a
So
man.
know this, Closers podcast audience. The Minnesota Police Department, the Minneapolis Police Department found you had declared the value of a life. They said that George Floyd's life was worth $20. Know that. Know that, that's not only the Minneapolis Police Department. That's commonplace amongst many police departments.
It's true. And you know, where does this problem come from? There's a multitude of different, of different ways to answer that question. There's a lot of different answers to that question. But through a lot of those avenues, you kind of get to the same place. And it's just that through our upbringings as Americans, through the media, maybe through like just family, through a lot of different ways that you're brought up, you consume things that kind of tell you white people are worth more, they're valued more than minorities. I mean, look at just the overwhelming number of white male and female leads that there are in TV shows, movies. You can look at a lot of different things. It's fairly common knowledge now, but a lot of the stories from back in the day, show minorities as being the bad guy and white people are the good guys. I mean, look at even our history, how people, how we're taught in history class in like elementary school that when the British came over to colonize the Americas, that you never really hear about like the atrocities that were done to like native populations or
No,
how
not they never go out and say that America is a nation built on the bodies of dead indigenous men and women and children by the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears of slaves.
yeah, never.
Slavery built on top of genocide. They never tell you that.
Even in our how we're taught in history class, white people are the good guys. I mean, think about like every time America is just talked about, you know,
No.
it's just white people. America equals white people equals good, right? That's just how that's how these how I was taught history when I was in elementary school and stuff. Maybe because it's just easy to make sense for kids, okay? But still, that's not right. And I think
No,
it starts from that.
it is a grand conspiracy. It's a grand conspiracy that the white identity is the premier identity. It is the true identity. It is
Yeah.
the American identity. And it is ingrained from us from the time we are in children through not only advertising and marketing, but also through education and through our societal interactions. Everywhere we go, we are reminded of the white regime, the Anglo-Saxon, the Anglo-American regime.
Hmm.
And as we grow through that, we grow underneath that umbrella,
Exactly.
that blinding white light.
So much so that we all probably most of us forget about it. Most of us are so comfortable within that
Yeah,
little
well, yeah,
underneath
yeah.
that umbrella that we just don't even think about it.
It becomes commonplace, man. You know, it's like living with a smell. Eventually it just becomes part of the overall ambiance of the place. But when things have gotten really rotten,
Say it. Just say
fruit flies.
it.
I couldn't help myself. I set myself up for it
Yeah,
perfectly.
you
But
did. You did.
what all joking aside,
That's a Bohemian Rhapsody reference, by
yeah,
the way.
all brevity aside, um, you know, America is a Anglo um American regime. It's a regime, man. I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah,
It's a regime,
it is.
and I
And
mean that in the most oppressive sense.
sorry, I don't disagree. I do not disagree with you. I totally agree with you. It's really unfortunate what happened to George Floyd, and you know, I just felt like it was very important for us to discuss it candidly, but also kind of come at it from an angle of trying to inform. Another aspect that I didn't touch on, this is not confirmed, so remember that when I say this. Um, but signs are pointing to that the riots and the looting um, was started by undercover police officers. And
Oh,
there's
that's for sure. That's for sure a true thing.
you think it's for sure a true thing?
Oh, for sure true.
Okay.
For sure true. It's almost like, come on.
Well, no, I believe I personally think so. It's just like there's no like none of the news outlets have like definitively been like this is fact. It hasn't been like, but we all know it, but it's not like,
Those same guys are the
yeah.
guys that showed up in the hood a week ago, and they're like, "Do you know where I can find some what?" drugs, pushing up their glasses.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. So that and they do that, the, the police want to make these rioters look, they want them to become from protesters to rioters. They want that connotation to be there because if there's that difference, there's a difference in the consciousness of Americans. There's a difference between protesters and rioters. Rioters equals chaos, protest equals order. They want to show that these people are bringing chaos, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bunch of bullshit. I
Not only that, they want to show and portray African Americans as
yeah,
as 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 disassociates of the American lifestyle of
exactly.
bad. They want to portray African Americans as bad actors in
Exactly.
this
These
whole
people,
thing. You know,
100%.
they want to hold up the examples of windows being smashed through, cars being set on fire, and you know buildings ablaze. They want to say, look, this is the African American. That's
Yeah.
not true. We know it not to be true, but that's what they want us to believe.
It's the same tactics that they were using in the 60s and even before that. It's the same thing. The same thing that they've been doing for basically the existence of America in general. And
Yeah.
like my dad said yesterday, I was talking to him about it, and he was like, "Look, this whole police brutality thing, it's been around for minorities for a forever. And now with technology, people are able to record, people are able to see these acts being committed. Now the police is chicken, they're the what the fuck is it the chickens are home to roost? Is that what you is that the saying?
Think so. The fat lady singing.
Basically. Basically. And now it's, they have to pay for this behavior.
Mm.
Like now it's getting to a point where they cannot hide these injustices anymore. It was so easy for them to do that before technology progressed to a certain degree. Now it's not. And you know, it just goes back to the hope that one day this will become a rarity as
Yeah.
opposed to something that happens all the time. And right now we're
Hope.
not there, but
Yeah. Hopefully, 100 years from now, people will look back and they'll be like, "What were you guys thinking? You guys were so stupid."
exactly,
But
yeah. I hope. I hope. But so right now, that's all we know. Those are our thoughts. Those are our opinions on um, everything that's happening in Minneapolis. There's going to be more things to occur. Will the three other police officers also get taken into custody? We don't know that yet. Hopefully they do, because I believe they are just as accountable as the officer who committed the actual murder, because they were there and they didn't stop it. Um, but those things will remain to be seen. Definitely keep an eye on the New York Times, or not New York Times, the Rolling Stones timeline if you want to uh, get the latest information, because they've been doing a really good job updating that timeline. But that's all I have to say. Quinn, is there anything else you want to chime in before we go? Any parting words?
I would just say that stay safe. Just stay safe. That's all I would say. Stay safe.
Yep. Stay safe, guys. We'll catch you next week with a new episode. Follow our Instagram account at the Closers Podcast, our Facebook page at Closers Podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on when we post new content. We should have our new episode out next week, probably around like um, Friday or Monday. We're not sure yet. We might have two episodes because since this one's pretty spur of the moment, we might have two. So we'll see what happens, but you will hear from us soon, guys. And like Quinn said, please stay safe. Take care.